like we always do about this time.
Yes, blockchain crypto gang. What up, gang? Thank you for tuning in and checking out Blockchain Crypto Gang YouTube page. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. You can hit me up at mycryptoslang@gmail.com. Anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to get into a couple stories I think are very, very important. I think very insightful. But before then, what we're going to do is we're going to get into, let's check out the market real quick. Everybody's interested in the market, right? So, of course, we got still cryptos at the market at 3.25 trillion. And of course, we have seen a little bit of downward motion due to, I believe, the Iran-Israel controversy and conflict that's going on. But Bitcoin is still holding at a good 105,000-ish. We have Ethereum at 2,500, XRP at 212. We're seeing a downtrend in all of these different currencies right now. Solana, we'll just look at the top 10. BNB 640, Solana at 142, Dogecoin at 17 cents, Tron 27 cents, Cardano at 61 cents. So there's a lot of different theories of why the market is going down. A lot of people moving their assets to a more safer position due to the conflicts that are going on in the Middle East. Now, this is a different story, though, that I think is very interesting. What it's showing you is what the title implies, and something I've been saying for a minute. Walmart, Amazon, they're eyeing corporate stable coin in order to save money on transaction fees, etc. This is something that's been going on really behind the scenes for a while now. We've seen a lot of this action going on behind the scenes for some time. Let me go ahead and put some music in, man. Yeah, so I mean, I've reported on news like this before on CryptTalk podcast years ago, even on this channel. A lot of different companies are looking to make moves in the blockchain sector, cryptocurrencies or whatnot, in order to make their business more efficient, more cost effective and whatnot. And here we go. Walmart, Amazon, both who have indicated things like this before. And like I said, and I believe this story is going to pretty much confirm what I've implied in the past, which is that even the last live stream, I said this. I said, hey, a lot of these companies, they have things that they're working on that they're not necessarily going to go full-fledged with until they feel like the framework is going to support it. So they don't want to necessarily get involved in creating and trying to deploy certain services in their business, not knowing if the framework legislatively is going to support it or not. They don't want to get caught up in a XRP type of situation. So they're kind of falling back until everything is worked out, which is very understandable. Okay, so let's just go ahead and go through this particular story. Just give me a second. Okay, here we go. So, Walmart and Amazon are preparing to launch their own stable coins as U.S. Senate advances landmark legislation that would establish a federal regulatory framework for privately issued digital dollars for the first time. So they're waiting. They're announcing it now, getting a little bit more comfortable with such an announcement because they believe that, we are on the brink of this type of legislation that would support ideas like this. Believe me, it's not just Walmart and Amazon that are thinking like this. Hundreds of companies are thinking like this. Banks are thinking like this. They've already indicated such. So the legislation known as the Genius Act has passed committee and cleared cloture with the final Senate vote scheduled for the 17th. So just in a few days, they're going to be voting on this. Per Bloomberg and Wall Street Journal, both retailers are exploring the feasibility of issuing stablecoins backed by the U.S. dollars or treasuries. The companies have not made formal announcements or filed license applications, but internal teams have begun evaluating technology partners and compliance paths. Their primary incentive appears to be cost reduction. And we have seen a lot of this going on throughout corporate America. Them hiring different ex-regulators and or blockchain developers, tapping different blockchains or whatnot. So they're looking to do this because they understand the efficiency upgrade, the cost reduction. So card processing fees range between 1% and 3%, and Walmart and Amazon spend an estimated $14 billion annually. $14 billion annually on such costs. A 1% reduction would translate to roughly $1 billion in annual I don't know what that is. EBITDA, EBITDA gains. Amazon's payment volume positions it for comparable benefits. So they're saying, hey, we can save a lot of money by using blockchain technology, stable coins, to do some of these transactions rather than the transaction fees that are incurred by using Visa, MasterCard. So, this is just a quick summary. The Genius Act represents a marked shift in Washington's approach following the demise of Facebook's, now Meta's, Deem project. It was also called at the time, before they called it Deem, what did they call it? The Libra. Was it the Facebook Libra that they were trying to push years ago? That was kind of shut down by the government because they weren't ready, because they didn't figure out a way how they could benefit. That's my opinion. So they shut that down. Now that the framework is kind of getting worked out, now that they're starting to see that the traditional market is starting to embrace cryptocurrencies with ETFs and all these different companies and countries that are embracing and adopting it, now they look like they're a little bit more on par with such an action. So hence why you're starting to now see more of a branding model or interest or outward, appreciation or venture to these sort of things. Now I'm going to show you something. This is from my Blockchain Crypto Gang YouTube page.
Everyone kept at
Crypto Gang. This is the video, fair use, that I pulled from YouTube, and I want to share it with you guys. Here we go.
Launch the new currency. Russia and China just made their move without waiting for anyone. No coin, no big reveal, but something far more advanced is now in motion, already moving energy, trade, and influence without touching the dollar. And here's the part no one expected. It's not branded, it's not loud, but it's working right now. What they just activated isn't just a currency play. It's a long game financial realignment. And honestly, it's picking up speed. Here's what's quietly happening behind the headlines. Russia is now settling oil and gas trade with India and China using crypto.
No, this isn't something new, by the way. Venezuela tried this. They made a petro that was supposedly, anchored on their oil reserves. Didn't really take off. A lot of other countries have been doing similar things. We've seen with the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, they were both using Bitcoin in order to fund the conflict, to get around sanctions and or sabotaging of their economic traditional banking system. So this is something that a lot of these, you have to understand that a lot of these countries, they see the same things and the same benefits that we see on a micro level. The efficiency, the cost effectiveness, the directness, the not having to worry about an intermediary that may be adverse to what they're trying to do, a way that they can directly do business across the board without going through the SWIFT messaging system, without having to use the US dollar as a reserve currency. this is something that you should be considering when you're looking at where to put your assets and how to, you know, have your dollar leverage against inflation or whatnot, right?
That's confirmed.
So that's confirmed.
Reuters, March 2025. Not theory, no discussion, active settlement. China, already ahead. Its digital yuan is being used in cross-border pilot programs, especially with Belt and Road.
For those who remember or are privy to the information, then you know that China made a digital yuan years ago. They were piloting it internally within their own country and their own banking system for a good year or so. Now they're moving it to cross-border. So this is the second largest economy in the world, partnering with other countries. In case you don't know, BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now they have a couple dozen other countries that are participating in their venture to create currencies that are basically to replace the US dollar as reserve currency, or just to give an alternative method of cross-border transactions.
Are now integrating it into their own systems. Russia's digital ruble is also in motion. It's cleared for cross-border payments, and it's being tested in real trade environments. What does this mean? The dollar is piece by piece across entire energy corridors. This is how systems change, not all at once, but everywhere at once. Now here's where the shift gets deeper. The big headline never came, but the foundation did. BRICS Pay is already live, a decentralized currencies and digital tokens. BRICS Bridge, pushed heavily by Russia, is in development. It's a blockchain-based clearing system, linking BRICS members' digital currencies into one network. No single coin, but one seamless way to settle trades. Think of it this way. Instead of, which means they can trade fast, securely, and without the dollar anytime they want. And the more countries plug into this system, the stronger it becomes. That's not theory. That's already starting.
So, you know, the reason why I'm showing you this is just so y'all will understand, those who are watching, and some of you already understand, why it's important to have your money diversified in different ways that can be a leverage against inflation and a safe haven in the event that the US dollar continues to plummet. You know, with these tariffs that are going on and things like that, you should have your saving alone just is not going to be enough. Putting it in the savings will not be enough. If your money's not working for you, you're going to fall behind. This isn't a theory. This is just a fact. If you don't understand how to put your dollars in use and at work for you, you're going to fall behind in this global economic system. That's just a fact. Where you put your money is up to you. But now that we have the technology with blockchain, that now we can do things with DeFi very similar to what rich, wealthy people have been doing for a long time. Remember, there was a time where in order just to have stocks, you had to have a broker. You had to have a pretty nice size bag. You couldn't buy fractionalized stocks. You couldn't give a broker $50 and expect him to be able to run a play for you with these stocks. That wouldn't have been enough because they have their fees. You would have to drive down to a broker. Yeah, we would have to speak to him. You'd have to give him a bag. You'd have to do all these different things that, yeah, it made sense if you had a lot of money. But for the average person, it didn't. Keep in mind, remember when we had the gold rush, when we had the oil boom, these are things that blue collar, everyday working class people could not participate in. Now we have the technology that we can participate in such things. Now we can maximize and we could benefit the same way banks do with their money. We could sit our money in different protocols that could be lent out. This is how banks make their money. They lend out money and they also invest your money in different things with fractional reserve banking. Now we can do similar things and take the benefits for ourselves. That's why this news like this is important and misunderstood and not really mainstream as of yet.
This isn't a direct attack on the dollar, and that's exactly what makes it effective. What Russia and China are doing is building parity, but giving them a choice. And increasingly an incentive, making local currency trade possible where it wasn't before. And the longer these systems run, the less pressure there is to hold United States reserves. This isn't about launching a confrontation. It's about offering alternatives and letting global trade shift on its own. And right now, honestly,
I like the way that was framed there. It may not necessarily be about taking down the dollar per se, but what it is about, and this is what cryptocurrency and Bitcoin was created for, was to give an alternative method of transacting or holding store of value that doesn't require an intermediary, that doesn't have the risk of a central point of failure. So they're given different options. That's what Bitcoin was created to do. I know everybody gets into this, market because they want to get rich overnight and all that, which isn't really a safe thing to do. Not that you can't make money, but there's layers to this. There's levels to this. What it's really about is options. 2008, 2009, when we had the global market crash, Bitcoin was created as an alternative way to hold your wealth that doesn't require centralized authority or centralized point of failure. It was a way that blue collar people could still hold value, could still transact, and could have a currency that's not attached to any government. It's not a fiat currency. But that's essentially what they're doing now on a macro level.
Shift is accelerating. Here's what most of the world isn't seeing. A growing number of countries, especially in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America, are beginning to test and adopt parts of these BRICS-backed systems. Kenya, Brazil, UAE, Iran, Egypt are actively engaging with BRICS pay pilots. Even France, during a 2023 LNG purchase from China, paid in yuan. These aren't symbolic moves. They're a signal global trade doesn't need a single center anymore. The more this spreads, the less dominant any one currency becomes. And analysts predicted, well, digital currencies really cut through the friction. There's no need to build new banks or set up traditional clearinghouses. You don't have to wait for delays from sanction-ridden systems like SWIFT. And importantly, there's no reliance on U.S. intermediaries. In fact, the BRICS blockchain platform, which was announced in March 2025, is designed. It's not just some crypto experiment. It's actually a geopolitical tool built to protect trade in a multipolar world. And with AI, automation, and smart contracts, they're able to... Honestly, this isn't the future. This is already... Odysee project has stalled. The truth is, it's just moved underground. Behind the scenes, sources close to the block confirm the BRICS currency isn't being rushed. It's being engineered to last. The idea isn't a flashy launch. It's a pay and bridge. The goal, a neutral settlement unit backed by commodities, digital infrastructure, and coin. It's a blueprint for bypassing reserve currency dominance permanently, deal by deal. There's no official countdown. But insiders are watching August 2025. The next BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia, as a potential pivot point. Trade infrastructure. There's talk of new nations joining with currency interoperability as part of the entry terms. And Russia has signaled it wants to present a joint proposal for a neutral settlement. It may not be marketed as a launch, but in practice, it could lock in systems that undermine dollar dominance from the inside out. And once those rails are live, the shift becomes much harder to stop. While the West debates the feasibility of a BRICS currency, a growing part of the world is already using BRICS systems. Asia are setting up their own cross-border payment link. modeled partly on China's digital yuan framework, and is attending BRICS meetings. IMF quietly acknowledged in April 2025 that multipolar currency corridors are now a permanent part of the financial system.
Not only that, as I reported before, the IMF also tapped XRP as a potential creator or blockchain, Ripple, in order to create a multinational currency, stablecoin. So these things have been happening. We don't see this in the mainstream news as of yet. But the fact that you have access to this type of information and access to the technology that this information is based on means that we are able to make the type of moves that would put us in position to benefit or at least safeguard ourselves in the event of a dollar collapse. It's basically just about having options. I'm not telling you what to do with your money. I'm saying, hey, there's a reason why I always say you want to know how to deal with some of these decentralized protocols, these decentralized wallets and exchanges in order to participate, and DeFi in general, in order to be able to participate and be ahead of the curve of some of these things to come. There's a reason why you don't see this on the mainstream. They're not going to mainstream some of these things that are happening and give people the leverage and ability or knowledge that they can forego some of these traditional financial methods, because these traditional financial methods feed the machine. And when I say machine, I mean the Wall Streets. I mean some of these large banks and centralized banks. This is why they're trying to catch up in many cases. This is why, okay, ETFs are now available. So now you can take Bitcoin to Wall Street. So they can still benefit from people holding Bitcoin. That's fine and well if you're okay with that. But on the other side of that coin, pun intended, you can be benefiting with how your money is making money rather than letting others benefit. So yeah, you want to understand how to deal with these protocols.
This isn't a BRICS project anymore. It's a global response to years of dollar overreach and the vacuum created by fragmentation. And it's expanding from the edges inward. Let's be clear, this isn't the death of the dollar, but it's the rise of credible alternatives, and that's just as disruptive. So, just to put things in perspective, over 80% of Russia-China trade is now settled in yuan and rubles, and development deals to Belt and Road countries in yuan, basically locking them into its currency zone. And in 2025, more than 30 countries have expressed interest in alternative payment systems directly referencing dollar volatility. The US dollar may remain strong on Wall Street, but on the trade routes that move real goods, oil, gas, food, it's no longer the only option.
Which also raises a good point of, if there are a lot of real world assets being created, particularly and mainly on the Ethereum blockchain, is it time to start looking into some of those? They're going to put real commodities on the blockchain. Like I said, these are different alternatives to having safe havens for your money. I'm not saying take your money out of traditional banks. I'm not saying don't participate in traditional finance. What I'm saying is there are now options that didn't exist before. The way people invest their way into wealth is they catch waves before their waves. And the way they do that is because of access to information. This is why I don't do the moon boy on this. Yeah, I'll show you some different cryptos that if you know how to get them, that you may prosper. They may be high risk, but if you can get in early, a lot of times you can leverage that risk into gains. But you have to have access to the information and knowledge of how to work these different kind of protocols. And that will just give you different options and alternatives. That's what blockchain crypto gain is about. That's why I show you the news that's not being on the mainstream. And I give you stories of different developments, different partnerships that are happening globally, because you're not going to get it on the mainstream, because the mainstream media is sponsored by corporations and traditional banks.
And And for many economies, that choice changes everything. Most coverage calls this de-dollarization, but honestly, that's missing the bigger picture. What's really happening is rewiring of global economic alliances. Countries are building regional finance ecosystems, anchored in their own priorities. Commodity-rich states are demanding local currency trade, not dollar dependence. And tech infrastructure, from central bank digital currencies to blockchain rails, is accelerating that break. This is a monetary shift. It's a power shift, where trade, finance, and influence no longer flow through one center. And that's why this matters far beyond currency. Here's the hard truth the headlines often miss. There won't be a dramatic moment when the dollar falls. What we'll see, cross-border trade will continue shifting to multi-currency systems. Nations once, and for the West, the challenge isn't to stop this. It's to adapt before the shift becomes irreversible. Because what Russia and China are doing isn't just reactionary. It's strategic, structural. Real question isn't if the system changes, it's who gets left behind when it does.
That's facts. That is facts. Who's going to get left behind? This stuff is not being mainstream for a reason. Yes, behind the scenes, we're seeing, and we've seen this for years now. This is why I made highlighting the contrast between those in the government that are pro crypto and understand that blockchain technology has to move forward and be innovative in order for the United States economy to really be able to compete, and those who want to hold on to, you know, the traditional dollar as it is and fall behind the times. So those of us working class retail investors per se, those of us that understand this shift is happening, even though the mainstream isn't necessarily speaking about it and can make the proper moves and adjustments, we will likely be in a better position. But it takes the knowledge, and that's what Blockchain Crypto Game CryptTalk podcast is all about. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you guys like. I appreciate y'all. Peace.